Welcome to the new normal as far as fire and fire safety goes in the state of California. And joining us is Rob Marshall, the fire marshal from Contra, Costa County. This fire season that we've been seeing in California, it is going longer, months longer than we have in the past. What other changes are we seeing?
Fire behavior is much different than it has been in years past. We started to see a little bit of that last year with the fires in the North Bay, but what we've seen in Redding and other areas around the state is really unprecedented in the way that the fire is actually behaving.
What's changed?
I don't think any of us are terribly sure what's changed. The climate has obviously become different in some way. We have much higher winds than normal. The fire behavior reacts accordingly to that, and that it's just one of those things that we're really frightened of, quite frankly.
It's all over the state. It's up and down. It's in areas where we didn't see it so much before.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's one of the things that I think is most concerning to all of us, is that it used to be that fire season was, just a very particular time of the year, and especially so in Northern California. It started in Southern California where it became a year-round fire season, and now, unfortunately, we're getting to the point in Northern California where it's the same way.
Well, I was up at the Office of Emergency Service with the governor this past week, and his prognosis wasn't all that good. Let's take a listen to what Governor Jerry Brown had to say about what he's calling the new normal. It's a little disconcerting.
We're in for a really rough ride, and it's going to get expensive, it's going to get dangerous, and we have to apply all our creativity to making the best out of what is going to be an increasingly bad situation.
Now, one of the points he made was that California, as he said, wasn't designed for 40 million people, that we're living in places that we hadn't lived in 100 years ago, and they're directly in the line of fires that could be happening, that have happened for centuries.
Yeah, absolutely. We see that quite a bit, both in the Sierras as well as locally. When you look at places like Lafayette and Walnut Creek and the number of homes that are built in among oak forests, essentially, when you get fires in those areas, it becomes very different. Where we used to have fires that would burn underbrush and take care of all of what we call the ladder fuels, when you have houses in there, you can't have those kinds of burns. We have to put them out because we don't want them to get to the houses.
So that increases the odds of something, the fires being even more dramatic because there's more to burn.
Absolutely.
Has anybody given it, or is there, in the future, will we be able to continue to build the suburbs and the outer burbs in the same way that we have till now?
That's one of the big questions, I think, for planners throughout the state is at what point do we stop allowing people to build in the wildland areas? We do have some building codes that have been put into effect that help us with that, but it's still not necessarily enough.
We only have a little bit of time left, but one of the big questions or issues that's coming up, and it's going to be before the legislature, is the idea of power lines. Mm-hmm. Are they sparking the fires? Who should be liable? I'm not going to ask you about who should be liable for them, but how, if we're going to continue to build out there and put power and gas lines out there, aren't we just increasing the risk of something going wrong?
We are, but there may be some things that we can do to help that. One of the initiatives is to look at high wind events and to cut powers to certain areas when you have those high wind events, and that might help. Undergrounding of utilities is another way to potentially help.
That's not cheap. That's going to cost.
No, and that's the thing, is all of the solutions that I think are out there right now are all going to be very expensive, and we need to make a decision on how we're going to proceed.
Yeah, everything's going to get extensive, from utilities to fire insurance to everything else, but we keep coming to California, we keep building more. And Rob Marshall with the Contra Costa Fire Department, County Fire Department, he's going to keep going to get him busy. Thank you for joining us this morning. We've all been watching coverage of the fires in the northern part of the state, in the southern part of the state, and the Sierra. But what is the situation right here in the immediate Bay Area? Joining us is Rob Marshall, Fire Marshal with the Contra Costa County Fire Department. Rob, okay, we tend to think of these sort of being a bit in the distance. Mm-hmm. What we usually see here are a few ground fires, grass fires, lots of smoke, right, TV cameras, but not a lot of damage. But It's getting kind of close, especially in places like Walnut Creek. What's going on?
Yeah, absolutely. We have in Walnut Creek, Lafayette, and other places in the Bay Area a situation where we have the homes that are built in among the vegetation, and particularly when you're talking about places that have heavy canopies of trees, that becomes very dangerous when the weather conditions become
We saw
right.
that in the Oakland fire, the Oakland Hill fire.
We did.
But those are places that are surrounded by trees. But correct me if I'm wrong, I'm seeing it out in the grass areas, in the suburban areas, in places where you would usually be driving around saying, you wouldn't be thinking that a fire could burn something down here.
Right, absolutely. There was a fire in the east part of Contra Costa County just recently that was
Valley Fire?
The Valley Fire is one of them, and that certainly was predominantly grassland that went into trees. What we see is when you've got the light flashy fuels, those grasses, they burn into shrubs and trees, and that creates these really, really large fires.
Okay, but we have entire subdivisions out there now where there used to be virtually little or anything. We are building more and more and more, and not just in the wooded areas, not
Right.
just like I said, why are we doing it?
Because we need the space. Housing is at a premium, and they need to build houses to lower housing costs and provide housing for the people who live in these urban areas. As we all know from the commutes, those are long commutes sometimes, but that's why we're building out there, because that's where it's affordable.
Now, traditionally, those areas, when we say we start to go into the outer areas, the Brentwoods, the Antiochs,
Right.
and such like that, they haven't had that large of fire departments. And a fire is a quick responder. Now, as we increase the population, that's going to increase the odds of something going on. Are we manned up for it in the Bay Area?
We are working towards that. I can't speak to every fire department, but I know that Contra Costa Fire is trying to staff up. We're looking at ways that we can afford additional stations, afford additional crews, doing that through grants and just through strategic placement of
But we've in the
apparatus.
past had sort of, especially out in the further reaches of Contra Costa County, had this accordion effect where we have money and we build a station, and then we don't have money to staff the station.
Correct.
Staffing fire is not a cheap thing, and
Correct.
people don't seem to be all that willing to pay for it. But if their insurance is going to go up if they're building in these areas. Utility rates may go up as well in order to cover costs.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of different things that could occur. Obviously, the best thing to do is to prevent the fires from happening to begin with, because suppression is very expensive.
But preventing the fires to begin with sometimes leads to growth in the undergrowth and makes it even more combustible. So when it goes off, it really goes off. It seems like it's a catch-22.
It is, but we have some tools available to us. We can have people cut that undergrowth and do that kind of thing, and that can help.
One of the issues that's come up is controlled fires, controlled burns. The idea of burn it out before it takes up. But that's controversial. People don't like what it does to the air. It scares them, and some people say it's not safe.
Yeah, and I would actually fall under it's not always safe. Even small fires are still fires, and if the weather changes, and the weather can be unpredictable, especially in the Bay Area, where you've got the microclimates. If you get a change of wind, what is a controlled burn now is now an uncontrolled burn and can burn houses, and that's not good for anybody.
So the more we build, and the more we have a subdivision here and then grass and a few trees here and then another subdivision there, we can't do that controlled burn that we used to do for a number of reasons.
Right.
So that area between those two subdivisions becomes more volatile.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you got that year after year after year, it becomes worse and worse and worse, particularly when you have a high rain year like we had a couple years ago. That, again, contributes to the fuel load.
I only have a couple of seconds left, but one of the things people are asking is, with all the firefighters going up to the fires in the north and in the Sierra, what are we left with here? Are we safe?
We are. We generally, as soon as we send somebody out, and most fire departments do it this way, as soon as we send somebody out, we immediately backfill those positions and backfill an engine. So we are always covered when we have that. There may be a period of time, particularly if it's a close fire, there may be a period of time where we're trying to get that staff up. But we work very diligently to make sure that our citizens are protected first.
Okay, well, I want to thank you for coming in. Rob Marshall with the Contra Costa County Fire Department. For a fire season that's going longer than they've gone before. As a matter of fact, the governor and some of the fire people are talking about year-round fire season.
Absolutely.
Welcome to the new normal.